So this was a little bit of a surprising week in physics with the announcement of the Nobel Prize. It did not go to the gravitational waves discovery, which was a big deal. It went to this trio of physicists who developed this theory of topological insulators. Got a few thoughts on that. For one, if the prize did go to gravitational waves, or did go to LIGO, then you have the issue of how do you split a prize among all those thousands of people that worked on it, because the Nobel Prize can only be awarded to 3 people, which is a rule that I think they need to take another look at. So, obviously our collaborations are getting larger and larger, so it's going to be nearly impossible in just a decade or so for the Nobel Prize to only go to 3 people. But second, the work on topological insulators has been around longer, and it's grown into its own field. And so in that sense, it's sort of been waiting for the Nobel Prize longer, whereas the gravitational wave discovery is a big deal in that it sort of heralds this new era of gravitational wave astronomy, but we're not in that era yet. So the prediction by the folks at LIGO is that they will be able to make these observations more frequently. Now that they know that it works, now that they know what to look for, they're expecting, to be able to make observations of black hole mergers of, I think, Dave Wrightsey said about once a month or something like that. It's at least multiple times a year that they'll be able to do that. So it might be more appropriate for the Nobel Prize to go to gravitational waves when that becomes more commonplace, when that becomes an established field of gravitational wave astronomy, instead of just being, we made 2, possibly 3 big observations. Again, not that those aren't big deals, but it hasn't ushered in a new era of study the way the topological insulators has. But one thing that is worth pointing out about the LIGO discovery, I think, is how they went about announcing it. They went through the appropriate peer review process, and then it became a big news item. If you compare that to the big faster than light neutrinos debacle from a few years ago, they did the opposite, right? They went to the newspapers first, saying that they'd broken the theory of relativity and that they'd proved Einstein wrong, and then went through the peer review process, which then found the error. And so, the leaders of that initiative had to resign. Whereas LIGO did it the appropriate way. They went through the peer review channels first, and then they had the big news item. Now, maybe that meant that it wasn't as big a news item as it should have been. But, well, no, it was pretty big in the news, at least on my news feed it was. But then again, my news feed is a little bit biased toward physics news and not other types of news. So anyway, that's just a couple thoughts. So I would say give it a few years, and I imagine there will be a Nobel Prize for the gravitational waves observation. But they do have to address that issue, I think, of it only being awardable to 3 people.